Welcome back to Build a Mobile App in 2 Hours. In this session, we're going to synchronize the planet data. So to synchronize planet data to the local planet, we're actually going to use an accelerator option that will let us synchronize them in a read-only fashion. So if we look to the right, we're going to have our local planet local storage entity, and when we right-click on it, we'll be able to create the action and do read-only or read-write. So we're going to be using a read-write. And this accelerator takes advantage of the offline data synchronization framework that's available in mobile apps inside of OutSystems. That framework includes 3 client actions, one to do offline data sync, one to configure that synchronization, and then another one to trigger it. And then it also has a server action to do the server data sync. So here we can see our offline data sync, and once we run our accelerator, it will create a sync local planets. And then in the server actions, there is the server data sync, and it will add a sync planets. So this will make more sense as we go through the process. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we jump into synchronizing our local planets, let's take a quick look at the offline data synchronization framework inside of OutSystems. So if we go to the Logic tab and we open up the client action offline data sync, we'll see that there is a trigger offline data sync, and this just calls the data synchronization capability. If we open the offline data sync, we see that it calls the server data sync. And if we go down to the server actions, in offline data sync is our server data sync. The server data sync checks if you're a registered user, and as long as you're a registered user, it will log that you're doing a synchronization, and then it seems to leave an empty space here. And that's because what you're going to synchronize and how you will do that is up to you, because it will depend on your business logic and what entities you need to synchronize. So this is the default offline data sync framework, and the only piece we didn't look at is offline data synchronization configuration. So we can always trigger a synchronization whenever we want by calling the trigger, but we can also have it set so that anytime we come online, anytime we log in, or anytime the app resumes, it will automatically synchronize. So for us to be able to control things a little bit more easily, let's go ahead and say that when we log in, we'll set this to true, and this means that at any point we log out and log back in, it will do the data synchronization. Now it also says, should we retry? And it's set to false. And then if we do retry, how many seconds should we wait before we retry? So if for some reason while we're synchronizing things fail, it can automatically retry to make sure it's working hard to get the latest data whenever it can. So this is the base offline data synchronization framework. When we go to the Data tab, for our local planet, if we right-click, we can see that we now have the ability to create the sync data, and we're going to create the action to synchronize the data as a read-only capability. So it created this sync local planets inside of the offline data sync folder to put it with the rest of the framework. And you can see that it's going to call sync planets that it created in the server action area. And if we want to see what that looks like, we can just double click on sync, and it's doing something similar, but it has real behavior. It's going to check the role to make sure you're authorized to get to the server. It's then going to retrieve the planets that are on the server, and then it's going to set them in the list. And that list is what's being returned. So if we look at sync planets, it returns a local planet list. Now if I go back to the previous editor, so it's going to return a list, then it's going to go to the device and delete all the local planets, and then it will create or update all of the local planets given the sync local planet list that came back from the synchronization. So from what got created for us, sync local planets will call the sync planets for the server, but something has to call sync local planets. And this is where offline data sync is what really does the synchronization. Trigger calls that, so if we go into offline data sync, we no longer wish to call server data sync here. We can delete this. What we'd really like to call is sync local planets. So we can just drag and drop this over here. And now it's going to call that, and we looked inside of the logic of how that's going to call the server and bring the planets back. So that's really all we need to do to be able to synchronize the local planets from the server to local storage. And as long as we log in and log out, it will perform that for us. So one thing has happened over here. Our server data sync that was part of the framework is no longer being used. So it has a warning underneath it just saying that it's no longer something that seems to be necessary, and we could delete it if we want to. And just to prove that that works, let's go ahead and delete that as well. All right, so that's it for synchronizing the local planets. We're going to begin building the planet screen, and as we work with the screen and the interface, we'll log out and log in to make sure all of the planets get updated. So join me in the next section where we begin building the Select Planet screen.